Hey team, thank you so much for joining me on the Baby Playbook podcast. Make sure you are getting your reviews in and your likes in on the podcast so we can make sure we get this to as many mums and dads and parent-to-bes as possible, or young parents, or even if you're right in the thick of, teenagehood and you just need a refresher on babies. Today, we're going to have an amazing guest on who's going to be speaking a little bit about something that we hear a lot about when we have a baby. Even when we're pregnant, we start hearing about this thing called the bounce back, okay? So, when you're meant to be getting back into shape and get back to your exercise, apparently, based on society, super quickly after having a baby. It has been kind of this trend that we're seeing, rise with social media as well, with a lot of people getting out there and, showing off their bounce back bodies, which I am, if that is your thing, I'm a super huge fan of you doing that. If that is, in your realm and something that you'd like to get straight back into once the baby arrives. But, for some of us, we would like to just chill out and not have that pressure on us. So today I'm speaking to Jen Dugard. She's an award-winning prenatal and postnatal specialist. She's all about safe pre and postnatal exercise for mums. She's the founder of MumSafe, and I'm going to be linking all of her things in the show notes for you. But she works with women long after childbirth and has a real good understanding of this pressure to bounce back and how that can cause some serious damage, not just, I guess, physically, but also mentally. And she is going to be talking to us about that today. Jen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's such a good topic to speak about, isn't it? Because I think, I don't know about you, but I started thinking about my bounce back when I was first found out I was pregnant. You're immediately, you're like, oh, I hope I hope I don't get too many stretch marks, and I hope I don't gain too much weight and make it harder for myself after. It's just like this automatic thing that pops into your mind.
Isn't it such a shame that when we're growing new life, that's what we're thinking about? And that's, as women, we've been so conditioned that our appearance and potentially our worth in the world is wrapped up in the size and shape of our body.
Yeah, of course. I want to ask about bouncing back. So, of course, there is a safe time to get back into exercise after having a baby and all of that. And we can talk about that soon. But I first want to talk about why I guess it's so important to make sure that you're not putting, this enormous focus into rushing back into things, because it can actually be quite a flawed and harmful idea for parents.
Yeah, I think if we could, the goal is to get to the end of this episode and we're not going to use the term bounce back anymore.
Got it.
That would be my number one takeaway. So I've worked in the fitness industry for such a long time. And one of the things that I think the fitness industry has done is reinforce that bounce back. So the second that a mum walks into the gym, the assumption is, if she's got a young baby, the assumption is that the only reason she's there is to get her body back. Now, number one, it's absolutely impossible to get your body back to what it was. It's grown a human, it's birthed it in one of two ways. You are going through a normal part of the aging process as a woman, and we're not ever going to get our bodies back. Zero. So if we can start to think about, what are we moving forward into? And inside MumSafe, we've completely removed the terminology bounce back. We actually ran a campaign a few years ago called No More Pre-Baby Body. And I'm not trying to get my pre-baby body back. But to your specific question around why is it so harmful, it's, the statistics on eating disorders are huge. The statistics on mental health, especially in the postpartum period, are huge. And when women are navigating this brand new, period of their life, we're now adding this pressure of, you now need to worry about the size and shape of your body and to get it to a certain acceptable state and as quick as time as possible, rather than, how about we nurture you through this period of adjustment into motherhood, adjustment into the new way your relationship looks, adjustment into understanding your body, because, we're not educated on how our body's changing in pregnancy, how it will change through birth, how it's going to change postpartum. So I think the biggest thing is, adding that stress to a new mum. And then playing into, and unfortunately we've got this rise of, the GLP-1, so Ozempic and whatever it is, fueling that. I'm not sure, I think you're a little bit younger than I am, but I grew up in the, 90s, size zero, and we're bringing that back and we're putting it onto new mums, and that in itself is incredibly harmful. Under eating, over exercising, and why as women is our self-worth all about what we look like?
Yeah, very true. And I was going to move into a question now, but you've kind of answered it slightly. Is I thought actually a couple of years ago, before this kind of Ozempic era or whatever it is at the moment, I felt like we were kind of on track to like more of an acceptance, of all bodies and taking care of ourselves well, and just I guess there was more chat, at least online, at least maybe on my feeds. Every feed is different, I guess. Of being a little bit more gentle on ourselves when it came to our bodies and exercise and the expectations. But does it feel like for you we're still on that trajectory, or is it kind of shifting again?
I think it depends on the circles. And I know in my feed, I have a lot of the, not even body positivity, but body acceptance kind of messaging. And that's what I choose to align myself with. And I think that's, one of the biggest awarenesses that we can have as women is if you go down these rabbit holes of looking at really lean or skinny women, Ozempic, all the rest of it, your feed is going to feed that to you. But there is that, there's still a huge body positivity or body acceptance movement out there. And I do think, I like to think that we're becoming more accepting of different body shapes. I wonder though, like my daughter's, 15, 16, I wonder if it's a generational thing is happening. So there's maybe, how old are you? Are you happy to share how old you are?
Yeah, I'm in my early 30s. So
okay, cool. So I'm in my 40s. So maybe there's me and then there's your age group that have had this body acceptance, and we've seen, I live on the Gold Coast. It's like so cool to see different body shapes and sizes just on the beach and all of their nothingness really, but they're out there. And then I do worry for our younger girls again that it's kind of coming around. So I think it can be what you make it. There is a massive awareness around GLP-1s and what they're doing to our perception of body image again. And there are the people driving the body acceptance wave, and let's keep driving that, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I guess one of the tips in as well that I got from friends actually was that you should be curating, your feed if you are on social media. And I remember, I'm doing it now at the moment as well, pumping in the middle of the night, but like you do kind of like get on your phone and you start scrolling. And naturally, if you're seeing more positive things, then that's something you can actually do for yourself, is really make sure that you're following the right people that align with your values, the way you see things, and that can really motivate you. And that'll obviously get you to a point at which, you can get into, I guess, a healthy recovery and a healthy back into a healthy exercise routine, whatever that looks like for you. Can you give us a bit of insight on what that recovery should actually look like? What's real motherhood, exercise, and maybe even some tips on, I guess, the stages of how your body is post-birth?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I heard the word should, and I think every woman's different, right? So what I'm going to say is a continuum, and it's going to look different for different women. There's a lot of, if someone is listening and they are heavily into the fitness space, there's a lot of new research coming out in the working with women and mums space. Unfortunately, whilst the new research is good, a lot of it is done on either elite athletes or women that are used to exercising to a higher level. So whenever we're looking at a new study,
not my category,
well, not a lot of people's category, we need to really think about what is the research saying. So there is research out there saying, women need to be moving as soon as possible postpartum, and exercise is good. So this is good because it's reducing fear for women that are like, I'm not sure if what I'm doing is going to be bad for me. On the flip side, the level of exercise that woman is used to doing could be a lot higher than the everyday woman that's had a baby. And that's also taking into consideration that more women are exercising to a higher level than we've really ever done before. And that's fantastic. The place that I sit in is, no matter your exercise history or your journey, there's tick points of what we can do. And for someone that's not used to exercising or has a big exercise history or exercises at a lower level, maybe those checkpoints are going to take a longer period of time. And I'll go through the checkpoints in a second. And then for someone that is highly trained, maybe they've exercised through pregnancy under the guidance of a pelvic health physio, which will be something that I bring up. Maybe that person's checklist is going to be, squished and they're going to move a little bit faster. But and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because of the new research, is how do we put together a standard of care for a postpartum woman that every woman can do? She can just lengthen or condense the process depending on what is right for her and what she's done before. So based on that, I would say that every woman, and I'm going to use the word should purposely, if they have access to, go and see a pelvic health physiotherapist in the postpartum period. So we have this thing called our 6-week checkup. And what we know is a 6-week checkup is the end of her postpartum medical care. It is not a green light tick of approval to go and do whatever exercise that you want to do. Yep.
Okay.
Did you see a pelvic health physio? It sounded like you've heard of one
Yeah,
before.
I've seen one. Yeah, definitely in all my post-pregnancy journeys. And yeah, I can attest to that. Of course, it's really
Amazing.
drilled in that it's really important for you.
Yeah. And did you see one in pregnancy?
I did as well. Yeah, especially in my second and third, because I think, of course, there's a little bit more pressure on your pelvic at that point. You've really put it to the test.
Yeah, and also understanding that if you do see a pelvic health physiotherapist in pregnancy, they can help you to prepare for birth, which might give you better birth outcomes, and therefore your recovery postpartum is going to be, I'm going to say easier. It's not easy, like potentially more straightforward. But for a woman who is either pregnant or has had a baby, making sure that you've got a pelvic health physio in your corner, making sure that you understand your pelvic floor. So pelvic floor is an internal muscle. So if you're going to go and work with an exercise professional in any given environment, if they're saying that they can feel your pelvic floor, they can't. We cannot see or feel your pelvic floor. It's an internal muscle. We can put our fingers inside of your hip bones and feel your transverse abdominis. And those muscles are designed to co-contract, but what we can feel externally doesn't tell us about what your pelvic floor is doing. So for a woman postpartum to get to understand, what is her pelvic floor resting tone? Does she, when she thinks she's drawing her pelvic floor up, does she actually contract? Because 60% of women, or research suggests 60% of women actually push out through their pelvic floor when they think that they're drawing up. We don't want someone going into a Pilates class or even yoga or strength training and they think that they're drawing their pelvic floor up and they're pushing it out and now they're doing it under some kind of load. So really understanding that you know how to contract your pelvic floor, and then with that, understanding that you know how to release your pelvic floor. Because some women have pelvic floors that are what we call too tight or hypertonic, and that's where a pelvic health physiotherapist in pregnancy could help support you to understand how to release your pelvic floor in order to prepare for a vaginal delivery. So understanding your pelvic floor with a pelvic health physio would be at the start. Then understanding your transverse abdominis and, do you have any abdominal separation and things like that to help guide the movement that you go forward. And then introducing your body to things like stretching out through the chest, strengthening your back, stretching out through the hip flexors, strengthening your glutes. So looking at which parts of the body might be tight during pregnancy and that we want to strengthen postpartum, and then gradually taking you on a journey of progressive overload over time. So, we call pelvic floor and all the postural work, the rebuild from the inside out that sits at the bottom of the pyramid. There's a bit in the middle that we call it basic movement patterns done well with some twists, turns and carries. So we want to do that because that's what you're doing in daily life. And then for those women that want to go exercise harder and heavier, we call that like the fancy stuff, which is the top of the pyramid. And for some women, the fancy stuff will come way down the track. And for others, they might be doing it again within, a couple of months, depending on their journey.
It's really good that you outline that as well. And I think the other thing that, you really make quite clear as well in your work is that pushing yourself can actually have more of a negative effect than a positive effect. So actually taking it slow and actually focusing on these areas is only going to be beneficial for you in the short and long term, really, to get you to a place where perhaps you do want to be in that elite category or the hard and fast exercise category. Well, to give yourself the best chance to, I guess, get there at the appropriate time. And it's really good to have that focus. Can you explain what could be the negative effects if we just, jump right in, or we take things too fast, or we put that pressure on ourselves to get into it a little bit too quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I want to share this in a way that doesn't create fear for anybody. So that's really important. The more educated we are about our bodies, the more that we can implement the right things. And we want to get you to a point where you're progressively overloading over time. And I use the word safe a lot, but safe doesn't necessarily mean easy. Safe means that you have enough awareness and understanding of your body to know where that sweet spot of getting slightly better or improving or getting stronger is beneficial versus, like you were just sharing, going too hard, too fast to the point at which, we tip you over the other end and you're actually potentially damaging or weakening over time. So, some of the things that could happen, like you could end up with an unexplained injury that's got a lot to do with your pelvic floor or your pelvis, which is, I've got knee pain, but it's because my pelvis is out and I didn't know my pelvis was out. But had I seen a pelvic health physio, I would have understood my pelvic floor wasn't working in the way that we want it to. Worst case scenario, we could end up with someone could have a prolapse over time. So for anyone that doesn't know what a prolapse is, in a woman, you have the bladder, the uterus, and the rectum. And a prolapse is when any one of those organs falls into the walls of the vagina and in the worst case scenario sits on the outside of her body. Some women have a slight prolapse. That if we knew about it, we could do pelvic floor exercises or very conservative, take a very conservative approach to strengthening her pelvic floor and enabling her to do all of the exercise that she wants to do. Research is very grey around abdominal separation. There's definitely been stories of women having hernia, so an umbilical hernia, which is, protruding through her linea alba, which is the muscles down the middle. I think the biggest thing to take away is that if we don't have a strong foundation, we don't know what the outcome is down the track. So the very best thing we can do is have that awareness, build that strong foundation so that you can do whatever you want for as long as you want.
Yeah. And I think you've been speaking a lot about, as just the thing is, understanding yourself and education, because I guess that would be the most powerful tool in going forward with any exercise. It's even when pre-pregnancy, you go to I used to go to like these HIIT classes, and sometimes I'd prefer to go to one where I felt like somebody was watching my form, because I felt like I was just getting into it and like, I don't know, am I doing this right? Am I like picking up the weights right? But when you're doing it properly, again, that education only makes you, I guess, stronger and lead to better exercise and better for your body, right? So MumSafe is all about that education. Tell us a bit about, I guess, what you guys offer and what you really focus on when it comes to this area.
Absolutely. So MumSafe is all about making sure, the mission is to make sure all women have access to safe and effective exercise at every stage of motherhood. So for us, that goes from pregnancy all the way through to perimenopause and menopause. One of the biggest misconceptions is that there's an end to your postpartum period. That's not true. Once you've had a baby, you're postpartum for the rest of your life. And we want to make sure that
we're in a club.
We're in a club forever. And we want to make sure that women have access to that. So, all of our MumSafe trainers have at least one pre and postnatal certification, and we've got MumSafe trainers across Australia. We've got some in New Zealand. We're growing into the UK at the moment. We've also got one MumSafe trainer in Singapore. So each of those trainers, the mission is to make sure that when someone sees the MumSafe symbol, they know that they can trust that they have a trainer that is qualified, number one, in working with pregnant and postpartum women. And that education goes deeper than the early postpartum stage. They've done education on perimenopause, on menopause. They've probably done something on endometriosis. We've got a whole catalogue of ongoing education for those trainers. All of those trainers also work with pelvic health physios. So that's one of the criteria, and, goes back to what we were saying earlier on about, step number one, see a pelvic health physiotherapist. We know that exercise professionals can't do the best job that they can for the mums in front of them unless they have a pelvic health physiotherapist on their team, because we want to know what that woman's body is doing from the inside out. And then each of these trainers run, their own structured programs that are suitable, and they give adaptations to women or mums that are training with them. And we focus on 5 key contraindications: so pelvic floor, abdominal wall, wrist pain, knee pain, pelvic pain, which are very common in pregnancy and postpartum. And then they're also very trained in how to adapt exercise for pregnancy. If a woman's, I think one of the biggest messages out there for the general public is, when you're going to see a trainer or choosing a class, ask what their qualifications are. Ask them what they've learnt about over and above their certificate 3s and 4s, because we don't cover it in that. So MumSafe is about creating a brand that women feel safe, or mums feel safe exercising with, because they know that these trainers are credible and educated.
Yeah, amazing. And I want to also touch on the fact that, it's not also just about exercise, it's about the benefits that exercise provides. And one of those is really, the positive mental health benefits, especially postpartum, because during that time when you're in that like newborn craziness, whether it is one taking that time, I know it sounds so lame that, me time is like doing your pelvic floor exercises, but taking that time to focus on yourself actually can have a huge impact on you mentally, to the point of which, you know, going for a walk by yourself to clear your mind and to just get a little bit of movement in can also be really beneficial as well.
Absolutely. And I think the community part, when someone does find a group of mums, like so many women are raising kids. I mean, we just talked about it before, away from families. Like we don't always, a lot of women don't have the option to go back to where their families are. So we need to create that community around us. And for mental health, that becomes incredibly important. I think as well, the mental health element is when, if you are a mum exercising and you don't understand your body and it's doing things that it didn't do before, it can, you know, we can have this effect where we feel worse about ourselves. So if we ask trainers or, you know, coaches or whoever it is, or our GPs, midwives, for information about our bodies, we become more empowered about what we're doing, and then we really can move forward and make sure that we're moving in a way that supports us both physically and from a mental health perspective. But there's a huge correlation between exercise and mental health. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can also, I guess, as well, you know, stop comparing yourself to others, you know, because you know a little bit more about what your body's actually, you know, at what stage you are at in your own journey. You know, you'll stop looking at the person next to you and thinking, I haven't done as many reps or whatever it may be, you know, because you have that understanding as well.
Absolutely.
It's such an important area, and it's, you know, it is something that kind of can fall off the bandwagon, especially at the start, you know, when we are in the midst of it. You know, you're a mum yourself, Jen, so I'm sure you had that struggle where you kind of had to push yourself into it. What would you say to mums that I guess maybe are listening and they haven't really dipped into this yet? They haven't perhaps seen a pelvic, you know, floor specialist. I guess, what's the motivation that they need to kind of get there?
You know, I think generally you don't feel worse after moving your body. It can be really hard to get there. And I completely take that on, you know, whether you've got a newborn, sometimes it's hard to just have a shower and get out of bed and do the rest of it. I think taking the approach of something is better than nothing and nothing is wasted, because I think we also lay this, well, if I don't have an hour to go to the gym, what's the point? It's like, well, could you do a 10-minute body weight workout in your lounge room? Could you, you know, meet some girlfriends at a park and go for a walk? So I think, you know, taking that approach of something is better than nothing. And then if we think about, you know, once you've done the something is better than nothing and you're ready to embark on potentially more of a structured exercise routine, what environments can I put myself in where I'm supported? So obviously there's environments that do welcome your babies and welcome your children into those environments. And also who do I have in my network that can actually support me? So is it a tag team with another mum? So you can go for a run and one mum will look after the child and the other one will run. Is it your partner on the weekend and negotiating? It shouldn't be a negotiation, should it? But, you know, when is a good time that I can, you know, you can look after our little people and I can go take some time out, and, you know, or your mum, like, what are the ways that you can gain support from other people in order to take that time for yourself? And then make sure after you've done the exercise, go for a coffee. So it's not just about the exercise. You actually get to sit down and be with yourself for 5 minutes before you go back into the thing.
And knock out that mum guilt as well, because I think that's also a bit of a hurdle everybody has to overcome, is you will inevitably feel like the most horrible person walking out the door, you know, and maybe baby's crying and dad's holding baby and you're like, I don't think I should go for this walk. But taking care of yourself is taking care of the family and taking care of your baby. So I think that's a really important thing to remember as well.
Absolutely. I like to drill into that a little bit further. And, you know, a lot of mums go, well, I'm exercising to look after, like, I have to exercise so I can look after my baby. Yes, and you're a human, you're a woman. You get to exercise because it's good for you. And you were that person before the little people came along. So, you know, really helping her to claim that part of her as well.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much, Jen. It's really great to kind of delve into this chat and motivate a few mums to look into it as well if they haven't yet. You can, of course, follow MumSafe on their Instagram and Facebook, MumSafe Movement, but I'll link that all in the show notes for everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.